When my son walked into my room, I was already lying on the floor, clutching the left side of my chest. "Stop pretending, old woman. No one's going to believe your little act." Those were the words I heard as I crawled across the carpet toward my phone to dial 911. My fingers felt like rubber. I could barely see the screen, just a blur of numbers and the bright green call button. Somehow I hit it. Somehow I got it to speaker. 911, what is your emergency? My throat was dry as dust. I could taste metal like I'd been chewing on batteries. I forced my tongue to move. My chest, I whispered. I think heart 223 West Cottonwood Drive. I don't remember if I finished the address. I just remember the operator repeating it back to me, her voice calm and professional. I remember the carpet fibers pressed into my cheek. I remember my son's footsteps stepping around me like I was a pile of laundry. Unbelievable, he muttered under his breath. "You'll do anything to make me look like the bad guy." Then everything went dark. When I woke up, I was staring out one of those sickly yellow hospital ceilings that always look like they were painted in 1972 and never touched again. There was a beeping somewhere to my left. Something tugged at the back of my hand, an IV. The air smelled like disinfectant and faint boiled vegetables. My mouth was so dry it hurt. I turned my head slowly. An older nurse with kind eyes was adjusting something on the monitor. She noticed me stir and leaned over. "Welcome back, sweetheart," she said. "You gave us a scare." I tried to speak, but it came out like a croak. What happened?" "You had what we call a stress-induced cardiac event," she said gently. "Not a full-blown heart attack, but your heart didn't like what was going on. You're at St. Joseph's. You've been here a day and a half." "A day and a half?" I stared at her. "Is my son here?" I asked, even though I already knew the answer in the pit of my stomach. She hesitated, just a second too long. "No, honey," she said. "We called the emergency contact on file. No one picked up. Do you have anyone else we should call?" My chest hurt in a different way then. Not the sharp pressure that had put me on the floor, but a deep, hollow ache that went all the way through my ribs. I closed my eyes. "No," I whispered. "It's just me." Lying in that hospital bed, hooked to wires and IVs, listening to muffled sounds of machines and distant voices, I suddenly had nothing but time. Time to think. Time to replay every moment that led up to my own son stepping over my body and calling me an old woman pretending. Time to ask myself how the hell I had raised someone who looked at his mother clutching her chest and thought, "She's just being dramatic." And of course, because I'm me, I did what I've been doing for 60 years. I blamed myself. Let me back up a bit. My name is Susan. I'm 60. I live in Mesa, Arizona, in a beige little house, in a beige little subdivision where every third family has some sort of lifted truck and a flag in their yard. My husband, Paul, died 3 years ago from pancreatic cancer, which is an absolute bastard of a disease. He was gone 6 months after they found it. We were married for 34 years. I met him when I was 23 and working as a receptionist at a little construction firm in Tempe. He was a foreman with a crooked smile and callous hands, proud of the fact that he'd paid his way through trade school by working nights at a diner. We built a life the slow, old-fashioned way. No big breaks, no lottery tickets, just saving, budgeting, patching up old cars, and cooking at home. He started his own small contracting company when he was in his 30s. And the last 10 years before he died were the best we had ever had financially. We had one kid, our son, Ethan. If you'd told 28-year-old me that the big, loud baby who used to fall asleep on my chest would grow into the man who'd stand over me when I was on the floor and accuse me of acting, I would have laughed in your face. But then again, if you'd told me I'd let him drain me emotionally and almost literally to death, I'd have laughed at that too. People always talk about abusive husbands, manipulative bosses, predatory landlords. Not as many talk about manipulative adult children. We should talk about it more. After Paul died, everything rearranged itself around the empty space where he used to be. We sold the business 6 months before he passed. Luckily, he knew he was getting sick. He just didn't know how fast it would go. Some bigger regional company bought him out. After taxes, legal fees, and everything, I ended up with a little over $15 million from the sale. On top of that, there was Paul's life insurance, the house, paid off, our retirement accounts, and my modest little IRA from working as an office manager. Altogether, my net worth was a little over $2 million. $2 million sounds like a lot until you spread it over the rest of your life. I wasn't about to be eating gold-plated steaks, but it was enough that I could sleep at night. Or it would have been if my son hadn't smelled it like a shark smells blood in the water. Ethan is 35. He's got his father's jawline and my eyes, which sometimes feels like a betrayal. He was always the artistic type, drawing instead of doing homework, doodling dragons and skulls and elaborate fantasy scenes all over his notebooks. We encouraged it the best we could. I bought him art supplies when other moms were buying video games. He talked about being a graphic designer, then a comic book artist, then a musician, then a tattoo artist. There was always a new dream, a new identity, a new phase. I used to think that meant he was creative and searching. At some point, it became obvious it also meant he couldn't commit to anything that required sustained effort. He dropped out of community college after 2 semesters because the professors were idiots. He quit an apprenticeship at a legit tattoo studio after 3 months because the owner was a control freak. He bounced from job to job, bartender, barista, retail, Uber driver, always quitting after a few weeks because someone was disrespecting him or didn't understand his art. Meanwhile, I did what so many mothers do. I worried. I spotted him rent money. I paid off a few credit cards just this once. I let him live in the house for a few months after his last breakup, which turned into almost a year. Paul used to warn me. "You're babying him, Sue," he'd say, his voice gentle but firm. "You don't teach a bird to fly by building it a more comfortable nest. You toss it out and let it figure out its wings on the way down." I'd roll my eyes and call him dramatic. "He'll grow up. He just needs time." Paul would sigh. "We won't be here forever, you know." Well, he wasn't. And in the space Paul left behind, Ethan stepped up, just not in the way I'd hoped. I remember the first time Ethan brought up the tattoo studio after Paul died. We were at the dining room table, the one Paul built with his own hands, a big, solid oak thing that could survive a nuclear blast. It was covered in papers, state documents, bank statements, the fine print nobody warns you about when they talk about inheriting money. I had reading glasses on, highlighter in hand, my brain already mush from trying to figure out what tax advantage distribution actually meant. Ethan strolled in wearing a band t-shirt and joggers at 2 in the afternoon. "Hey, Mom." He kissed the top of my head, like he was doing me a favor by acknowledging I existed. "How you holding up?" "Peachy," I said dryly. He glanced at the statements, the nice fat numbers at the bottom. "That all from Dad's business?" he asked like we were talking about a scratch-off ticket. "Some of it. Some retirement accounts, some insurance." Whistle low. "Damn, you're set." I bristled. "It's not like I won the lottery, Ethan. This is supposed to last me 20, 30 years. Medicare doesn't cover everything, you know?" Yeah, he said, already bored. "But you don't need it all just sitting there doing nothing, right?" I should have heard the alarm bells then. They were probably blaring. But I was tired, grieving, and used to interpreting everything Ethan did in the most generous possible way. "What are you getting at?" He pulled out a chair and sat down, face lighting up like he'd been rehearsing this speech in the mirror. "So, you know how I've always wanted to open my own tattoo shop?" I resisted the urge to say, "No, I know you've always wanted to do 15 different things and followed through on none of them." "Uh-huh," he went on. "I've been thinking, this is kind of like the perfect moment." I mean, I've already got a name picked out, Eternal Ink, and Liam said he'd totally come on board as my lead artist. We could do custom work, flash, walk-ins, the whole thing. There's that strip mall over on Main with the empty corner unit. Could be perfect. Good foot traffic next to that bar and the smoke shop. He was off to the races, hands moving, words tumbling over each other, painting a picture of edgy murals and neon signs and hit music blasting through the speakers. "Okay," I said when he finally took a breath. "Do you have a business plan?" He blinked. "I just told you the plan," he said. "Eternal ink, corner unit, walk-ins, custom work." "That's an idea," I corrected. "A business plan is numbers, rent, utilities, equipment, licensing, insurance, marketing, how much it costs to open, how much you need to bring in to break even, how you scale, stuff like that." He rolled his eyes. "You sound like Dad." "That's not an insult," I said. He ignored that. "Look, Mom," he said, leaning forward, dropping his voice into that reasonable tone he uses when he's about to say something completely unreasonable. "I've done the math, okay? I figure we'd need I don't know, 200 grand to start? 3? 2 or $300,000? I repeated. "It's nothing compared to what you've got," he said quickly, "and it's not like you wouldn't get it back. It's an investment. Tattooing is exploding. Everyone's got tattoos now. It's recession-proof. Once we're up and running, you'd get paid back with interest." I stared at him. "Ethan," I said slowly, "do you have a written business plan?" "Well, no, not written, but I've been thinking about it a lot." "Do you have any savings to put in?" "Mom, I'm barely making rent now." He said that like that was a charming personality quirk instead of a blazing red flag. "Have you talked to a banker, an accountant, a lawyer?" He huffed. "Why are you being like this? Dad would have believed in me." There it was. When all else failed, pull out the ghost of the dead parent and use him like a weapon. I felt my throat tighten. "Your father worked his ass off for 30 years before he opened his own business. He started with a used truck and a loan he almost didn't get. He had a plan, he had clients lined up, he had money saved. He didn't walk in and say, 'Hey Mom, spot me some cash, I'll figure it out.' So you're saying I'm a loser." "I didn't say that, but that's what you mean. Every time I have an idea, you shut it down. You've never believed in me. I finally find something I'm passionate about, and you..." "Ethan," I cut in, exhausted. "This isn't about passion. It's about reality. $200,000 or $300,000 is not pocket change. If you want to open a business, you need a plan. You need to show me numbers. You need to show me you can hold a job longer than 3 months." He stood up so fast, his chair scraped against the floor. "Unbelievable," he said. "Dad dies, and you turn into a greedy dragon sitting on a pile of gold." He stormed off, leaving my heart pounding and that horrible mixture of anger and guilt churning in my stomach. That was the first time. It was far from the last. For a while, the tattoo studio conversation was just that, a recurring argument, like dishes left in the sink or towels on the floor. He'd bring it up, I'd say no, he'd get upset, I'd feel guilty. We'd circle around the drain and then move on. But slowly, like a frog in a pot of water that someone is bringing to a boil, things escalated. First, it was just emotional pressure. "Don't you want me to be happy, Mom? You know, if Dad was here, he'd help me. You're going to die with all that money in the bank and nothing to show for it. Is that what you want?" Then it became more pointed. "You're so selfish. You care more about numbers on a page than your own son. After everything I've been through, you can't do this one thing for me?" He started raising his voice more, slamming doors, pacing. I started avoiding being home at certain times. Spent extra time wandering around Target, buying things I didn't need just so I didn't have to walk into my own living room and see the look on his face. The thing about emotional abuse is that it doesn't show up like bruises. It creeps in quietly. It wears you down. It makes you question if you're overreacting, if you're being unfair, if you're actually the problem. And the thing about being 60 and widowed is that you're already doubting yourself all the time. Maybe I am being selfish. Maybe I am a coward. Maybe I do owe him this. Maybe this is my fault for not pushing him harder when he was younger, or for pushing him too hard, depending on the day. Mothers can always find a way to blame themselves. It's our real superpower. The last 3 weeks before my little trip to the hospital were the worst. Ethan had just broken up with his latest girlfriend and moved back into my house temporarily. Just until I get my own place, he said, which roughly translated to, until someone else is willing to finance my life. He didn't help around the house, didn't chip in for utilities, didn't so much as rinse a plate before dumping it in the sink. He stayed up late playing video games, slept half the day, and spent the other half talking about the studio. By then, the number had somehow gone from 200,000 or 300,000 to just the full 2 million. "You could put it all in, Mom," he said one night, sprawled on the couch while I folded laundry. "Think about it, we'd have the best shop in Arizona. Top-of-the-line equipment, multiple artists, marketing budget, maybe even open a second location later. We could turn that 2 million into 10. "I'm not putting my entire life savings into a tattoo shop," I said, amazed I even had to say the words out loud. "Why not?" he demanded. "What else are you going to do with it? You don't travel, you don't go anywhere, you just sit in this house and watch HGTV reruns." "For one thing, it's not sit around and do nothing. It's called being retired," I snapped. "For another, I might need long-term care someday. I might have medical expenses. And third, I am not obligated to turn my life's work into seed money for your unplanned fantasy business." He sat up, eyes narrowing. "What do you mean, unplanned?" he asked. "Ethan, do you have a business plan?" I repeated for what felt like the 100th time. He jumped up, voice rising. "I've told you the plan. I've told you over and over. You're just too stubborn to listen. You want me to fail. You like it when I'm miserable so you can feel superior." My heart rate ticked up. "That's not true," I said, standing up too, laundry basket in my hands like a shield. "I have always wanted you to be happy. I have bent over backward to help you, but I will not risk my entire future on a business you haven't even written out on paper." "You're impossible," he snarled. "No wonder Dad worked all the time. I wouldn't want to be around you either." That one landed like a punch. I turned away so he wouldn't see my face crumple. I didn't hear him come up behind me until he spoke right in my ear. "You know what? You're just jealous. Jealous that I have talent. Jealous that I actually want something out of life. Jealous that if I succeed, it'll be without you." I went to bed that night with my chest tight and my hands shaking. The next morning, we did the same thing. And the next. And the next. 3 weeks of yelling, accusations, door slamming, and me apologizing for things I didn't do just to keep the peace. 3 weeks of him telling me I was heartless, selfish, controlling, and that I'd ruined his life. 3 weeks of my blood pressure inching higher, my sleep getting worse, my appetite disappearing. Until finally, one afternoon, my heart decided it had had enough. The day I ended up on the floor, it was hot and dry outside, the kind of Arizona afternoon where the air feels like opening an oven door. I'd been cleaning the kitchen because, God forbid Ethan rinse a dish, when he came in, headphones around his neck, phone in hand. "Mom," he said, skipping hello like it was optional, "we need to talk." I already knew it wasn't going to be about how he'd applied to jobs or helped with anything. I set down the dish towel and braced myself. "About what?" I asked, trying to keep my voice neutral. "About the shop," he said. "I talked to Liam. He's ready to start in like a month. There's a piercer interested too. We're just waiting on you." "I've already told you."
"Yes, and your no is based on fear, not facts," he interrupted. "Look, I did some research, okay? There are shops in Phoenix that started with nothing, and now they're raking in like $500,000 a year. We could be one of those. But we can't do anything until you stop being selfish and actually help me." Something in my chest fluttered. "I am not being selfish," I said. "I am being responsible." "You're hoarding money you don't even need," he shot back. Do you know how insane that is? You're sitting on $2 million while your own son struggles. I offered to help you put together a business plan, I said, my voice rising despite myself. I offered to pay for a financial advisor to walk you through it. I offered to put in some money if you could show me you were serious. You refused. Because it's a waste of time, he shouted. I know what I'm doing. I've worked in shops. You worked in one shop for 3 months, I said, and left because you didn't like being told what to do. Ow! The ow slipped out because the tightness in my chest suddenly sharpened. It felt like a fist closing around my heart. I pressed my hand to my sternum. Ethan didn't notice. You're twisting everything, he was saying, voice loud and harsh. You always do this. You always make it about how I'm a screw-up instead of how you're a control freak. I swear to God, Mom, if you don't help me with this. I tried to cut in, but the room was starting to tilt. Sweat broke out on my forehead. My left arm was weirdly heavy, like it belonged to someone else. I took a step forward and stumbled, catching myself on the edge of the counter. Ethan, I managed, I don't feel good. He rolled his eyes so hard I thought they might stick that way. Of course you don't, he snapped, because the moment someone calls you out, you suddenly get the vapors. This is what you always do. I can't breathe, I whispered. He watched me sink to my knees like it was a performance. When I hit the floor, the pain was radiating up into my jaw. I looked up at my son, the baby I had carried, the toddler whose scraped knees I had kissed, the teenager I had watched walk across a graduation stage. And I said the stupidest thing I could have said in that moment. I need help. He didn't move. Stop pretending, old woman, he said coldly. No one's going to believe your little act. I don't know if my heart broke more from the pain or those words. Maybe both. I crawled toward my phone like a wounded animal, my vision blurred at the edges, the sound of my own heartbeat roaring in my ears. He made a disgusted noise and walked away. I still don't know where he went. Outside? His room? I just know he wasn't there when the paramedics arrived. In the hospital, I had plenty of time to think. About that moment. About the 3 weeks before it. About the 35 years before that. About every time I had shielded Ethan from consequences to protect him. Every time I'd written a check instead of letting him figure it out. Every time I'd smoothed things over, made excuses, told myself, he's just going through a phase. Every time Paul had said, we're not doing him any favors, and I'd waved him off, I thought about how my heart hadn't given out when Paul died. As god-awful as that was, it had given out because my own son had turned into a stranger who saw me as a walking ATM and emotional punching bag. The nurse popped in and out, checking vitals. A doctor in his 40s, with tired eyes, came in and went over what had happened. Your heart is okay for now, but this was a warning shot. Stress is a major factor. You can't keep living under that kind of pressure. He asked me if I was under any unusual stress at home. I thought about Ethan standing over me, calling me a faker. No, I lied. Just the usual. He looked like he didn't believe me, but he nodded anyway. A hospital social worker came by the next day. She had a clipboard and that deliberate, gentle tone they use when they're fishing for abuse without saying the word. How is your home situation? She asked. Do you live alone? Do you feel safe there? Safe. What a loaded word. I live with my son, I said. Is he supportive? I felt my eyes sting. He has a lot of expectations, I said carefully. He doesn't always handle disappointment well. She tilted her head. Does he ever make you feel threatened? I almost said no, but the memory of his voice, the contempt, the dismissal, flashed through my mind, and instead I said, He yells a lot.
And he said some things when I was on the floor that my throat closed up. She nodded slowly. That sounds stressful, she said. You don't deserve to be yelled at in your own home, and you certainly don't deserve to be called a liar when you're having a medical emergency. That was the first time anyone had said it out loud like that. You don't deserve. Something cracked inside me. I started crying, ugly and sudden, the way I hadn't even cried at Paul's funeral because I'd been too busy making sure everyone else had coffee and tissues. The social worker handed me a tissue box and let me sob until I ran out of sound. When I calmed down, she talked to me about boundaries, about financial abuse, about how just because someone is your child doesn't mean they're entitled to your money or your emotional health. She gave me printouts about elder abuse hotlines and senior legal aid, things I never imagined I'd be reading at 60 with a working brain and relatively decent health. Just in case, she said, you're not alone. You have more options than you think. I nodded and tucked the papers into the drawer next to my bed. That night, I lay awake in the dark, listening to the distant beeping of machines, and I made myself a promise. I wasn't going to die this way. I wasn't going to die with my son screaming at me for money while I clutched my chest on the kitchen floor. If my heart was going to give out someday, it was going to be on my terms, not as the final chapter of someone else's tantrum. Ethan finally showed up on day 3. He walked in wearing the same t-shirt he'd had on when I collapsed. His hair was unwashed. He smelled faintly of weed and cheap cologne. "Hey," he said, hovering by the door like a teenager visiting a relative he barely knew. "Hi," I said, my voice flat even to my own ears. He glanced at the monitors, the IV, the blood pressure cuff. "They said you're okay," he said quickly, like that absolved him of everything. "I'll live," I said. He shifted his weight from one foot to the other. "Look, Mom," he started, "about the other day." I waited for, "I'm sorry, I thought you were faking while you were having a cardiac event." Instead, I got, "I didn't mean to stress you out that much, but you scared me, you know? I thought you were just trying to make me feel guilty." I stared at him. "You thought me lying on the floor clutching my chest was, what, performance art?" He winced. "I said I'm sorry," he muttered. "Can we not make this a big drama?" I felt something inside me go very, very still. I think collapsing on the floor and calling 911 qualifies as drama all by itself, with or without your contribution. He scowled. "See, this is what I mean. You're always twisting everything to make me the villain." "The shoe fits," I said before I could stop myself. His mouth dropped open. "What is that supposed to mean?" he demanded. "Ethan," I said, suddenly exhausted, "I almost died. I asked you for help. You accused me of faking it. The paramedics asked where my family was. I had to say he's around here somewhere. I don't know how to twist that into anything other than what it was." He didn't want to hear it. He waved a hand like he was swatting a fly. "Whatever. You're fine now. That's what matters. So, have you thought any more about the shop?" I actually laughed. I couldn't help it. It came out a little hysterical around the edges. "You're asking me for $2 million in a hospital room?" He frowned. "It's not asking for money. It's asking you to invest in your own son's future. If anything, this whole thing should be a wake-up call. Life is short. Why are you hanging on to all that cash like some kind of miser instead of helping me build something real?"
Something in me stopped bending right then. Maybe it was my spine finally remembering what it was for. Maybe it was Paul, somewhere over my shoulder, whispering, "I told you so, honey. Now get up." Either way, the next words out of my mouth surprised both of us. I said, "Get out," quietly. Ethan blinked. "What?" I said, "Get out." I repeated, my voice firmer. "I am not having this conversation with you in a hospital bed while I'm hooked up to heart monitors. If you can look at your mother in this condition and still make this about your tattoo studio, then I don't want you here." He stared at me like I'd slapped him. "Wow," he said. "Real nice, Mom. Real nice." He turned and walked out. He didn't come back. They discharged me 2 days later with a folder of papers, a bag of new medications, and the doctor's advice ringing in my ears. Reduce stress. Sure, because stress reduction is so simple when your only child is an overgrown toddler with a persecution complex. A neighbor, Linda from across the street, picked me up from the hospital. She's in her late 60s, all floral blouses and sensible shoes, the kind of woman who always has a casserole ready, just in case. "You look pale," she clucked as she helped me into the passenger seat. "Thank you, Linda. That's very comforting," I said. She gave me a side eye. "You know what I mean." We drove in silence for a minute. "So," she said finally, "what's the story with Ethan?" I stared straight ahead. "What do you mean?" I asked carefully. "I mean," she said, "I saw the ambulance the other day. I saw them wheel you out. I also saw your son standing on the porch vaping. Didn't see him get in a car after you. Didn't see him leave. The first time I saw him again was this morning, leaving the house with a backpack." My fingers tightened around my purse strap. "He's busy," I said weakly. Linda snorted. "Busy my foot. Susan, I say this with love. That boy is no good for your blood pressure." I forced a smile. "I'm fine," I lied. "I'll handle it." She gave me that look older women reserve for each other, the one that says, "I know you're full of it, but I'll let you pretend until you're ready to stop." "Just know you can come stay at my place if you ever need a break," she said. "My guest room is always made up." "Thank you," I said softly. When she dropped me off, I stood in my driveway for a long moment, looking at my house. The same stucco, the same gravel yard, the same faded metal sun decoration by the front door. But everything felt different. Ethan's car was gone. Inside, the house was weirdly quiet. He'd left a note on the kitchen counter. "Staying at Liam's for a while. Text me when you've calmed down and are ready to talk like an adult." I crumpled the note in my hand. For the first time in weeks, I breathed all the way into my lungs. My heart still hurt, but there was space around the pain now. Space for something else to grow. Not forgiveness. Not yet. Something colder. Sharper. Resolve. 3 days after I came home, I drove to the cemetery. It was stupid, medically speaking. I wasn't supposed to be doing anything strenuous, and I'm pretty sure the cardiologist wouldn't have approved of me wandering around in 90-degree heat. But I needed to see Paul. I brought my little folding chair, the one I used to take to his softball games when he played in that over-40 league. I set it up next to his headstone and sat down with a grunt. "Hey, you," I said, staring at his name. The stone was simple, just like he'd wanted. Paul Andrew Martin, beloved husband and father, 1959-2022. Measured twice, cut once. He'd made the epitaph joke himself, of course. Said if he was going to be stuck in the ground forever, he might as well make one more dad joke on the way out. "Sorry it's been a while. I've been busy, having heart problems. No big deal." My voice wobbled. "I ended up in the hospital. Stress-induced cardiac event. That's what they called it. I know you're shocked. Me? Stressed? Unheard of." A breeze ruffled the little fake flowers someone had left on a nearby grave. "Ethan's still Ethan," I said. "You probably watched the whole thing like it's some kind of reality show. You saw him step over me. You saw him blame me. You saw me still trying to make excuses for him in my own head." I took a deep breath. "I know what you're going to say," I went on. "I told you so. And you'd be right.
I babied him. I shielded him. I tried to be both the soft place to land and the safety net under that. I never let him hit the ground. Ants crawled along the base of the stone. One struggled with a crumb twice its size, dragging it determinedly across the dirt. This is my fault. Not the hard thing. Okay, maybe the hard thing, but the Ethan thing. I helped make him this way. Every time I let him guilt me, every time I handed him money instead of a budget, every time I said, he's just sensitive, I was building this monster. It hurt to say it, but it was true. I can't fix everything. I can't go back in time and re-raise him, but I can stop this. I sat there for a long time, watching the ants, listening to the distant hum of traffic. That's when the idea came. It crept in slowly at first, like a cat slinking around the edges of the yard. He wants a tattoo shop. He thinks it's easy.
He thinks money just magically turns into success. What if he found out the hard way? Not by me handing him $2 million and watching him crash and burn from a distance, but by making him live the reality of what he claimed to want. I thought about Paul, coming home with calloused hands and sunburned neck, falling asleep on the couch with blueprints on his chest. I thought about the years he worked 14-hour days to keep his business afloat, the months where we barely scraped by because a client didn't pay on time. You always said the only way to learn is to work, I said, looking at his name. So maybe that's what I'll do. I'll give him what he wants, just not the way he wants it. The idea sharpened. What if I opened the tattoo studio, my name on the lease, my money, my rules? What if I hired real artists, ran it like a real business, made it profitable? And what if Ethan wanted to be part of it? He had to start at the very bottom. Cleaner, assistant, receptionist, errand boy. He'd get to see what a business actually looked like from the inside. He'd learn about scheduling, inventory, customer service, health regulations. He'd scrub floors and wipe down chairs and take out the trash. If, after that, he still wanted it, and if he proved himself capable, I could consider transferring ownership someday, on my terms, with conditions. And if he didn't, well, that would be my revenge. Not blowing up his life, not screaming at him, just calmly refusing to be his doormat ever again, and forcing him to confront the truth about work, money, and responsibility. I looked at Paul's name and smiled for the first time in what felt like forever. What do you think? Measure twice, cut once? The breeze picked up, rustling the dry grass around the graves. I took that as a yes. Opening a tattoo studio at 60 was not on my bingo card, but grief does strange things and near-death experiences rearrange your priorities in a hurry. I didn't tell Ethan anything at first. He'd texted me a few times. Hope you're out of the hospital. Let me know when we can talk about the shop like adults. Don't ignore me. This is serious. Mom, answer. I responded with short, neutral messages. I'm home. I need time to rest. We can talk later. Then I went to work. First, I called a lawyer. I'd never hired my own attorney before. That had always been Paul's territory. But I put on my big girl pants, made a list of questions, and found a business attorney with good reviews and a pleasant-sounding voice. We met at her office in Tempe. I wore my nicest blouse like I was going to a job interview. So, she said, after I explained my situation in the broad strokes, leaving out the part where my son had basically tried to guilt me into funding his fantasy. So, you want to start an LLC, wholly owned by you, to operate a tattoo studio? Yes, I said, and I want to make sure my son has no legal claim to it unless I intentionally transfer something to him later. She nodded. That's straightforward. We'll put everything in your name. If he works there, he's an employee, not an owner. You can also specify in your estate plan what happens to the business when you die. It felt weird talking about my own death in such matter-of-fact terms, but after the week I'd had, it was oddly reassuring. Next, I called an accountant. Then I talked to a commercial real estate agent about leasing a space. We looked at a few spots, but the one that stuck with me was, of course, the corner unit at the strip mall Ethan had mentioned. It was vacant, dusty, with a faded for-lease sign in the window, but it had good bones. Big windows, high ceilings, plenty of parking, good foot traffic from the bar and the smoke shop. I could already see the waiting area, the front desk, the art on the walls. The landlord was thrilled to have someone serious asking about it. Had a couple of kids come by talking about a tattoo shop, but didn't seem like they had their act together. I smiled thinly. Yes, I said. I'm familiar. We signed a lease with my LLC as the tenant. I wrote my first big check in years, my hand shaking only a little. At night, I'd sit at my kitchen table with spreadsheets and budgets spread around me like a paper fort. Rent, utilities, renovation, equipment, chairs, autoclaves, ink, needles, licenses, insurance, advertising. This wasn't the kind of thing you throw $2 million at and hope for the best. This was careful, deliberate, painstakingly researched. I talked to other shop owners. I watched YouTube videos.
I read Reddit threads where artists and owners argued about everything from tip etiquette to aftercare instructions. I decided early on that I wasn't going to blow a fortune. I earmarked a few $100,000 for startup costs and kept the rest of my nest egg safe and snug where it belonged. If the shop succeeded, great. I'd have an income stream in a place where other artists could thrive. If it failed, I'd survive. It would hurt, but it wouldn't wipe me out. Meanwhile, on the home front, I made some changes. I texted Ethan. We'll need to talk about living arrangements. I'm not able to have yelling and stress in the house anymore. Doctor's orders. He replied almost immediately. Here we go. I'm serious, I wrote. If you want to stay with me, there will be rules. Quiet hours. No shouting. You'll contribute to groceries and utilities. And we will not discuss the shop while my heart rate is above resting. He didn't like that. This is insane, Mom. I'm your son, not a roommate. You're both, I replied, and I'm not going to die to avoid upsetting you. He left me on red. Fine by me. Finding artists for the shop was both easier and harder than I expected. Easier because once word got out that a new studio was opening with serious backing and a clean, well-lit space, artists started sliding into my inbox on Instagram. Yes, I made an Instagram account. I'm not completely technologically illiterate. Harder because I had to figure out who was actually good, responsible, and drama-limited versus who just liked drawing skulls and calling it a day. That's how I met Maya. She came in for an interview wearing black jeans, a band tee, and more ink than bare skin. Full sleeve of flowers and geometric patterns, a delicate script on her collarbone, no rain, no flowers, silver hoop in her nose, hair in a messy bun. She laid her portfolio out on the table, hands steady. Her work was stunning. Clean lines, beautiful shading, solid color. Everything from tiny, fine-line tattoos to big, bold pieces. This is incredible, I said, honestly, flipping through. Thanks, she said. I've been at my current shop for 6 years, but the owner's a nightmare. No contracts, cash under the table half the time, no respect for client boundaries. I'm tired of it. We talked numbers, percentages, station fees, schedules. Then she asked me the question I'd been half expecting, half dreading. So, she said, leaning back, why are you opening a tattoo studio? No offense, but you don't exactly look like the typical owner. I laughed. No offense taken, I said. I'm a 60-year-old widow with a heart condition. I know exactly how I look. She smiled. So, why? I considered lying, saying something about always loving art or wanting to try something new. But something about her directness made me want to be direct back. I said, my son wanted one. He pressured me to fund it.
He thought owning a shop meant hanging out with his friends and doing tattoos all day with no plan, no budget, no responsibility. He yelled at me for weeks when I said no. I ended up in the hospital from the stress. Her eyebrows shot up. Jesus, she said. I realized, I went on, that he doesn't understand what real work looks like, what running a business actually entails. So I decided, fine, I'll open the shop, on my terms, with real professionals. And if he wants to be part of it, he can start by mopping the floors and taking out the trash. A slow grin spread across her face. That is the most mom revenge I've ever heard, she said. I'm in. I liked her immediately. We worked out a contract, yes, a real one, in writing. She'd be the lead artist. I'd manage the business side with help from an accountant. We'd bring on 1 or 2 other artists as we grew. We brainstormed names. Eternal Ink was off the table. That was Ethan's fantasy, not mine. We settled on Copper Cactus Tattoo. It fit. Southwestern, a little tongue-in-cheek, solid. I ordered a sign. Every time I wrote a check or signed a form, I thought of Ethan's face. Not with glee. Well, okay, sometimes with a tiny bit of glee, but mostly with something else. Sadness, resolve, a weird sort of hope. If anything could shake him out of his entitlement, it might be this. And if it didn't, then at least I'd built something real instead of just crumbling under his demands. The first time Ethan found out what I was doing, it wasn't from me. It was from Instagram. Maya posted a little teaser, a photo of the inside of the almost finished shop, freshly painted walls,
New chairs, still wrapped in plastic. Caption: something new coming to Mesa. Stay tuned. Hashtag Copper Cactus Tattoo. I was at the shop, arguing with the contractor about the lighting, when my phone buzzed. It was a text from Ethan. What the F is this? He attached the Instagram screenshot. I stared at it for a second, then typed back, the shop I'm opening. The bubble with his reply popped up so fast it was almost comical. You're opening a shop without me? I could almost hear his outrage through the screen. I took a deep breath and reminded myself of the cardiologist's lecture about stress. I'm opening a shop, I wrote calmly. You are welcome to come by and talk about working there, but I'm not handing it to you. I put my phone away and went back to the lighting discussion. 15 minutes later, the front door banged open so hard the little bell above it nearly flew off. Ethan stormed in, eyes wild. What the hell, Mom? He shouted, arms flung out. Is this some kind of sick joke? The contractor guy froze. Maya, who'd been sketching at the front desk, looked up with one eyebrow raised. Hi, Ethan, she said, keeping her voice level. We're working here. Keep your voice down. He ignored that completely. You told me you wouldn't invest in a shop. You told me it was too risky. You made me feel crazy for asking, and now I find out you're doing it behind my back? Contractor guy cleared his throat. Should I give y'all a minute? He asked. Yes, please, I said. We'll reconnect about the lights tomorrow. He practically ran out. I turned back to Ethan. First of all, I said, I told you I wouldn't invest $2 million in your unplanned fantasy. This is not that. This is a business I'm starting with a planned budget, professional help, and people who know what they're doing. He stared around the space like he was seeing it for the first time. You stole my idea, he said, voice choking. I almost laughed. You can't steal open a tattoo shop any more than you can steal open a coffee shop. It's not a secret. You don't own the concept. Eternal Ink was my thing. I said, this is Copper Cactus Tattoo. Different name, different plan, different owner. Maya stood up, stepping around the front desk. So you're Ethan, she said, giving him a once-over. I've heard a lot about you. He glared at her. Who are you? I'm the lead artist, she said. Nice to meet you. His eyes flicked to her heavily tattooed arms, her confident stance. But this is my shop, he said, pointing at the floor. My mom is just bankrolling it. Incorrect.
I said crisply. This is my shop. I am the sole owner. I am the one on the lease. Maya works here as an artist. You, currently, do not work here at all. He looked like he might explode. Unbelievable, he said. You're seriously going to do this, aren't you? You're seriously going to steal my dream and give it to some random person instead of your own son? Maya raised her eyebrows. Buddy, I've been tattooing longer than you've held a job, she said dryly. You want to work in a shop? You start at the bottom like everyone else. I held up a hand. Ethan, I said, I'm going to make you an offer. You don't have to accept it, but it's the only one on the table. He folded his arms. Fine, he spat. Let's hear this offer. I said, you can work here as a cleaner, assistant, and front desk administrator. All three. You'll be responsible for keeping the place spotless, sterilizing according to the protocols Maya shows you, handling appointments, answering phones, and making sure clients have a good experience. His mouth dropped open. I'm an artist, he said. I'm not a janitor. Right. Right now, you're unemployed. Those are the options. In this industry, most people start by sweeping floors and cleaning tubes. You're not special. His face flushed. How long, he demanded. How long do I have to do your grunt work before you let me be an artist? I chose my words carefully. If you work here full-time, take it seriously, show up on time, follow instructions, and help us turn a profit for at least 3 consecutive months, then I will consider transferring ownership of the business to you. Not for free, either through a structured sale or as part of my estate plan. We can work out the details later. But you will not touch a tattoo machine until Maya says you're ready, and you will have no ownership until you've proven you can handle responsibilities beyond drawing. A stunned silence settled over the room. Maya looked mildly impressed. That's actually generous, she said.
Ethan shook his head like he was trying to dislodge water from his ears. You're insane, he said. Do you hear yourself? You want me to clean toilets and answer phones in my own shop to earn something that should already be mine? It's not your shop, I repeated. And if you can't handle cleaning toilets, you can't handle payroll, health inspections, or clients suing you when you screw up a tattoo. His eyes narrowed. This is punishment, he said. That's what this is. You're punishing me. You're trying to humiliate me. I looked him straight in the eye. I almost died, I said quietly. You watched me crawl across the floor, and you called me a liar. You yelled at me for weeks. You have treated me like an ATM and a maid. I am not punishing you. I am establishing boundaries. If you want what you say you want, you can work for it like everyone else. If that feels like punishment, maybe think about why. He stared at me open-mouthed. For a moment, I saw a flash of the little boy he used to be, confused, lost, wanting something and not understanding why he couldn't just have it. Then it hardened into anger again. You're unbelievable, he said. You're choosing some random strangers over your own son. I'm choosing my sanity over being screamed at in my own kitchen, I said. Strangers don't do that. You do. Maya cleared her throat. For what it's worth, she said, this is a good deal. You say you want to own a shop? This is how you learn, from the ground up. Or you can keep talking about it and never do it. Up to you. Ethan's jaw clenched. This is wrong, he said. You'll regret it. He turned on his heel and walked out. The bell over the door jangled cheerfully behind him. I stood there, heart pounding, but not in the dangerous way, in the I just did something terrifying and necessary way. Maya whistled softly. Damn, she said. Remind me never to get on your bad side. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. He'll be back, I said. Or he won't, she replied. Either way, we've got a business to run. He did come back, 2 days before we opened. We'd posted the grand opening date on social media, hung the coming soon sign in the window, and handed out flyers at the bar next door. The buzz was good. Maya's clients were already booking appointments. The other artist we'd hired, Diego, had a solid local following. I was at the front desk practicing with the new scheduling software when Ethan walked in. He looked different. Not dramatically, still the same scruffy beard, the same hoodie, but there was something in his eyes. Less swagger? More calculation, he said without preamble. I closed the laptop. Okay, I said. Then let's talk ground rules. We went over everything, like we were strangers in a job interview. Hourly wage, schedule, responsibilities. You will clock in and out. If you're late, it's noted. If you no-show, you're done. No yelling, no arguing with clients. You take your breaks when the schedule allows, not when you feel like it. He chewed on the inside of his cheek, but nodded. You will not touch any equipment without permission, I continued. If Maya tells me you're not following health protocols, you're done. If you talk back to her, you're done. She's your supervisor here, not your buddy. Got it, he muttered. And the 3-month profit condition stands, I said. We track everything. At the end of 3 months, we sit down and review. If the shop is profitable and you've met the standards we set, attendance, attitude, performance, then we'll talk about the next step. If not, we're done. No do-overs. He tried for a joke. So you're micromanaging? He said. I'm holding you accountable, I replied. There's a difference. We shook hands. His grip was too tight, like he was trying to prove something, but I let that go. We filled out the paperwork. I entered him into the payroll system. He was officially an employee of Copper Cactus Tattoo. Not the owner, not the star, the cleaner and front desk guy. Phase 1 of my revenge had begun. The first week was chaos. Grand opening day, we had a line out the door. College kids, bikers, soccer moms, you name it. Maya and Diego were booked solid. Walk-ins filled the waiting area. The phone rang off the hook. Ethan, to his credit, showed up on time. He mopped the floors, he set up the waiting area, he restocked the aftercare packets, he helped at the front desk, checking people in, handing out forms. By noon, he looked like someone had wrung him out. This is insane, he muttered to me as he passed by with a stack of release forms. I didn't think it would be this busy.
Welcome to running a business, I said. Around 3 p.m., a woman in her 40s came in with her teenage daughter. They wanted matching little cactus tattoos on their ankles. Ethan was at the desk. Hi, welcome to Copper Cactus, he said, sounding surprisingly professional. Do you have an appointment or are you walk-ins? Walk-ins, the mom said. We saw the sign and thought, why not? Cool, he said, tapping on the tablet. We've got a bit of a wait, but if you fill out these forms, we'll get you set up. As they sat and filled out the paperwork, the daughter, a shy-looking girl with big glasses, glanced around. Is this your shop? She asked Ethan. He opened his mouth. Our eyes met. I saw the internal battle. He swallowed. I work here, he said finally. My mom owns it. The girl smiled. That's cool, she said. My mom and I fight all the time. I can't imagine working with her. You'd be surprised what you can do when you have to, he said. And there was something in his voice I hadn't heard in a long time. Humility. It didn't last long. By the second week, the cracks started to show. He was late twice. He forgot to restock the gloves. He rolled his eyes when Maya reminded him to log each client carefully for the health records. This is stupid, he muttered. We're just doing tattoos, not surgery. We're breaking skin, she snapped. We're dealing with blood. If you think sterilization is stupid, you can go back to your Xbox. They clashed more than once. Maya doesn't do entitlement, and Ethan has a PhD in it. I stayed out of it as much as I could, letting her manage her staff. But I kept notes, dates, incidents, patterns, because this wasn't just about revenge. This was about documentation. If there's one thing I learned from dealing with hospitals, lawyers, and the business world, it's this. If it's not in writing, it might as well not exist. I wrote up Ethan twice. Once for being late 3 times in a week, once for getting snippy with a client who asked too many questions. He signed the forms reluctantly, cheeks flushed. This is ridiculous, he said. You're treating me like some random employee. In this building, that's exactly what you are. Outside of work, we barely spoke. When we did, it was about schedules, supplies, bookkeeping. We might as well have been coworkers who happened to live on the same street. It hurt. Of course it hurt. No mother dreams of talking to her child like that. But every time guilt pricked me, I remembered lying on the floor, tasting metal, hearing his voice call me an old woman pretending. And I kept going. 2 months in, we had our first real crisis. The health inspector came. Now, I'm a rule follower. I made sure we had every permit, every license, every training. I printed out the state tattooing regulations and highlighted them like I was studying for a final exam. Maya is meticulous. Diego is careful. The whole shop smelled like disinfectant and green soap. I wasn't worried. Then the inspector, a woman in her 50s with a severe haircut and a clipboard, opened the supply cabinet in the back. There, jumbled together in a sad little pile, were used end caps and clean ones, some open boxes of gloves, a stack of disposable razors half spilled out of the package. My heart dropped. "Who is responsible for organizing this area?" the inspector asked coolly. Ethan, who had been wiping down a chair nearby, froze. Me, he said. She gave him a look that could curdle milk. "You cannot store used items next to clean ones. This is a contamination risk. This is how people get infections. This area needs to be reorganized immediately, and it better not look like this next time I come." She jotted something down on her clipboard. We didn't fail the inspection, but we didn't pass with flying colors either. We got a formal warning. After she left, I took Ethan into the back room and shut the door. "What the hell were you thinking?" I demanded, my voice shaking with a mix of anger and fear. "We went over this 10 times. Used items go in the biohazard bin. Clean items are stored separately. This is not optional." He scowled. "I was in a rush. We were slammed that day. I figured I'd sort it out later." Later in this business can mean someone gets an infection. Later can mean we get shut down.
Do you understand that? He rolled his eyes. She was overreacting, he muttered. I stared at him. This is exactly why I'm not handing you $2 million in a set of keys, I said. You think rules are suggestions. You think you can just wing it and it'll be fine. That is not how this works. Not with health codes, not with taxes, not with anything. He looked away, jaw clenched. I wrote him up again. He signed it, handshaking. You're enjoying this, he said suddenly. Aren't you? I blinked. What? You like having power over me, he said. You like making me feel small. You never got to do that with Dad around, but now he's gone, and this is your chance. The words were a punch to the gut. I would give anything for your father to be here right now, I said quietly, because if he were, he'd be telling you the same thing I am. Grow up. Take responsibility. Stop blaming everyone else for your mistakes. His face crumpled for half a second before he smoothed it over. Whatever, he said. You're still going to use this to screw me over at the 3-month mark. I know it. I met his gaze. I'm going to use it to make an honest evaluation, I said. That's all. He didn't believe me, but I wasn't doing this for his belief. I was doing it for my sanity. 3 months came faster than I expected. Copper cactus tattoo was doing well. Better than well, honestly. We had regulars. We had glowing Google reviews. We had a wait list for weekend appointments. People praised the cleanliness, the vibe, the artwork. Best shop in Mesa, one guy wrote. Owner is this older lady who runs a tight ship. Love it. I printed that one out and stuck it on the fridge. Financially, we were in the black. Not rolling in it, but solidly, comfortably profitable. I sat at my kitchen table one Sunday night with the spreadsheets printed out, a red pen in hand. Old habits die hard. Revenue, expenses, profit. Next to those numbers, a different set. Ethan's attendance, tardies, mornings, incidents. He'd improved. Slightly. He wasn't late as often. He'd gotten better at the front desk, more polite with clients. He'd even taken initiative on some things, suggesting we start a loyalty card, for instance, which actually brought in more repeat business. But the entitlement leaked out around the edges like a leaky faucet, complaining about grunt work, dragging his feet when it came to cleaning, acting like rules were personal insults. On paper, he'd done enough to not be fired, but had he done enough to be handed the keys to the kingdom? No, not even close. The next day, I asked him to stay after closing. Maya and Diego gave each other looks and made themselves scarce. Ethan sat at the front desk, tapping his fingers, eyes darting around like he was expecting a surprise party. So, he said, we did it, right?
3 months of profit, time to talk about making this official. Yes, we did make a profit for the last 3 months. The shop is doing well. I'm proud of what we've built. He leaned back, smirking. We, he said. You mean me. I mean all of us, I corrected. Maya, Diego, me, you. This is a team effort. He waved a hand. Yeah, he said. But at the end of the day, no shop without me, right? So let's talk transfer. I'm thinking you sign it over gradually, like you said. Maybe 50% now, 50% in a year. I stared at him. Ethan, did you think this was automatic? He frowned. What do you mean? I told you 3 months of profit was one condition. The other was that you show me consistent responsibility, that you show up on time, that you take the job seriously, that you follow rules without arguing. I did, he said quickly. I've been working my ass off here, Mom. You've seen it. I have seen you work. I have also seen you be late, ignore sterilization protocols, argue with your supervisor, and complain about almost every task that isn't glamorous. He flushed. Everyone's late sometimes. You're making a big deal out of nothing. I pulled out the folder. Inside were the write-ups, the attendance logs, notes from Maya, and even a couple of client complaints he didn't know I'd seen. I laid them on the desk. This is not nothing. This is a pattern, a smaller one than before. Yes, you've improved, but not enough to be trusted with an entire business. He stared at the papers like they were written in another language. So what, you're backing out? You're going to move the goalposts and keep this for yourself? I'm not backing out.
I'm doing exactly what I said I'd do. Evaluating. He slammed his hand on the desk. This is bull, he shouted. You never intended to give this to me. You opened it just to shove it in my face. You like watching me scrub floors. You like seeing me beneath you. You're sick. My chest tightened, but not enough to send me to the floor. Lower your voice, I said quietly. Clients are still in the back finishing up. He stood up abruptly. You're evil, he said, pointing a finger at me. You want me to fail. You want proof that I'm useless so you can tell everyone, see, I was right not to trust him. My own temper, which I had been holding by the scruff of the neck for months, slipped a little. No, I said, standing too. I want proof that you can handle responsibilities without me holding your hand. I want proof that if this shop is in your name and I get a call from the hospital again, you won't be too busy yelling about your dreams to dial 911. His face went white. Wow, he said. You just love bringing that up, don't you? You love reminding me. I bring it up because you don't seem to understand how close I came to dying, I said. You don't seem to understand that your behavior had consequences beyond your wounded ego. He laughed harshly. Please, he said, if you died, you'd finally get what you want, a legacy. Poor Susan worked so hard and her ungrateful son killed her with stress. You'd love that story. My vision blurred for a moment. Not from a heart issue this time, from rage. But I've learned something in the last few months. Rage is useless if you let it control you. It's only useful if you harness it. I took a slow breath. I'm not transferring ownership, I said. Not now, not under these circumstances. If you want to stay on as an employee and keep working, you can. If you want to go find another shop that will let you do whatever you want, you can do that too. But I will not be bullied, guilted, or manipulated into handing you something you haven't earned. He stared at me like he'd never seen me before. Then he laughed, a short, bitter bark. You really are unbelievable, he said. You lied. You lied to your own son. I told you the conditions, I said. You didn't meet them. You made the conditions impossible, he shot back. You were never going to be satisfied. You love being disappointed in me. He grabbed his bag from under the desk. I quit, he said. Okay, I replied. He blinked. That's it? He demanded. You're not even going to try to stop me? I swallowed the lump in my throat. No, I said. I'm not. He shook his head. You'll regret this, he said. When I open my own shop and everyone sees what a fraud you are, you'll regret it.
He stomped to the door. Then he turned back, delivering his parting shot. "Enjoy your little power trip, old woman. It's all you've got left." He slammed the door so hard the bell snapped right off and skittered across the floor. Maya poked her head out from the back, eyebrows raised. "Well," she said, "that sounded intense." I looked down at the bell on the floor. "I guess we need a new bell," I said. Then, because there was nothing else to do, I picked it up, set it on the desk, and went back to work. The next few weeks were strangely peaceful. No slamming doors, no yelling in my kitchen, no passive-aggressive texts about talking like adults. Just work, clients, schedules, inventory, payroll. I hired a new front desk person, a sweet young woman named Jenna who'd worked in a hair salon and was unreasonably excited about color-coded appointment books. Maya and Diego both expressed relief. "Don't get me wrong," Maya said. "Your kid has talent. He just doesn't have, well, all the other stuff." "Work ethic?" Diego supplied. "People skills?" Jenna added. I shrugged. "I can't give him those. He has to want them." As for Ethan, he made his choices. He posted a long, dramatic rant on Facebook about how his greedy mother had stolen his idea and cut him out of his own destiny. He said I was emotionally abusive, that I never believed in him, that I used him to get the shop off the ground and then tossed him aside. Some of our relatives saw it. My sister called me. "What on earth is he talking about?" she asked. "I thought you were helping him." I did help him, just not the way he wanted. I sent her the facts as succinctly as I could. The hospital, the pressure, the offer, the conditions, the choice he made. She was quiet for a moment. "I love him, but he's acting like a spoiled child."
"I know," I said. "Are you okay?" she asked. I looked around the shop, the hum of the machines, the laughter of a client in Maya's chair, the music playing softly over the speakers. "Actually," I said, "for the first time in a long time, I think I might be." Word got around. Some people believed his version. That's life. Every story has at least 3 sides. But the more he ranted online, the more unhinged he sounded. Meanwhile, Copper Cactus built a reputation. Good work, clean shop, fair prices, respect. I got to know our regulars. The nurse who got a tiny heartbeat tattoo after surviving her own heart scare. The widower who got his late wife's handwriting on his forearm. The young woman who covered a scar with a beautiful floral piece and cried when she saw it. Every day I watched people walk in, sit down scared, and walk out a little braver. It healed something in me. Not the part that missed my husband. Not the part that still ached for the little boy Ethan used to be. But the part that believed I was only good for giving and never for building. Turned out, I could build something too. About a year after we opened, I went back to the cemetery. The grass was a little greener, the air a little cooler. Even Arizona remembers how to be gentle sometimes. I set up my folding chair next to Paul's headstone and sat down with a sigh. "Hey you," I said. "Thought I'd give you an update." I told him everything. The shop, the clients, the days someone recognized me at the grocery store and said, "Hey, aren't you the Copper Cactus lady?" I told him about Ethan's meltdown, his quitting, his posts. I told him about the mornings I woke up with my heart pounding, guilty thoughts whispering, "You're a bad mother. You should have tried harder. You should have given him another chance." I told him about the nights I closed the shop, turned off the lights, and stood in the quiet dark with my hand on the wall thinking, we did this. Without killing myself to do it. We. I don't know where Ethan is right now, I admitted. Last I heard, he was working at a bar in Phoenix. Maybe living with friends. He hasn't spoken to me in months. The words hurt, but they also didn't. Both things can be true. I'm not going to chase him, I said. I spent 35 years chasing him. If he wants to talk, he knows where I am.
I will always be his mother, but I will not be his doormat. I'd rather have no relationship than the one we had before. A bird landed on a nearby headstone, pecking at the ground. Would you be disappointed in me? I asked quietly. The wind rustled the leaves of a scraggly tree. I thought about all the times Paul had told me, "You're too soft on him," and all the times I'd laughed and called him a hard ass. I think you'd be proud. Not of the way Ethan's turned out so far, but of me. Of finally learning the lesson you tried to teach both of us, that love without boundaries isn't love. It's sacrifice. And eventually, someone ends up on the floor. I sat there a while longer, letting the sun warm my face. On the drive home, my phone buzzed. A text. From Ethan. For a second, my fingers trembled. I pulled into a parking lot before opening it. The cardiologist would have been proud. "Hey," the message read. "Heard the shop's doing well. I'm working at this bar. It sucks. Thinking about trying to get an apprenticeship again. Can we talk?" I stared at the screen. A year ago, I would have jumped, rushed to call, offered money, offered solutions. Now, I took a breath. I typed carefully. "I'm glad you're working. I'm open to talking, but I won't discuss money or ownership. If you want advice about the industry or jobs, I can share what I've learned. We can meet for coffee." Dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. "Coffee is fine," he wrote finally. We set a time and place. Neutral territory, a Starbucks halfway between my house and his bar. When I walked in, he was already there, looking smaller somehow in the harsh fluorescent light. He stood up awkwardly. "Hey," he said. "Hi," I replied. We sat. There was a long, uncomfortable silence. "So," he said eventually, "I've been thinking." "That's good. I've heard it's healthy." He gave a short, reluctant laugh. "I was an ass at the shop. Before that, at the house. I know you almost died and I acted like—" He trailed off. "Yes," I said. "You did. I'm not saying this because I want something. I mean, I do want something eventually, but I know I can't just ask. I've had a rough year. Couch surfing,
Bad bosses, withholding tips, getting yelled at by drunk people for things I can't control. Turns out you were right. Work is harder than I thought." I sipped my coffee. "Work is work," I said. "Dream job or not." He looked down at his hands. "I still want a tattoo," he said. "I've been drawing, trying to build a portfolio. I know you said you wouldn't talk about money or ownership, and I respect that, but if you ever need someone to clean floors again, I'd do it. For real this time." I studied his face. There was still entitlement there, still defensiveness. People don't transform overnight, but there was something else, too. A crack, a willingness, however small, to admit he didn't know everything. "I don't need a cleaner right now," I said. "Jenna and the others have it under control. And Maya would murder me if I brought you back without her buy-in." He winced. "But," I added, "if you're serious about tattooing, I can put together a list of reputable shops that take apprentices. I can tell you what to look for in a contract. And if, down the line, you've got a stable work history, good references, and Maya agrees, we can revisit the idea of you doing an apprenticeship at Copper Cactus, as an artist, not as an owner." His shoulders sagged in relief. "That's more than I deserve," he said. "Yes," I agreed. "It is." He huffed out a little laugh. "You're still mean," he said. "You're still dramatic," I shot back. We sat there, two imperfect people with a lot of history between us, sipping coffee in a chain store. Whatever happens next, I know this. My heart didn't give out, so I could slide back into the same old patterns. The revenge wasn't the shop. The revenge wasn't making him scrub floors or turning down his demand for ownership. The real revenge was this:
I stopped letting guilt run my life. I stopped sacrificing my health, my peace, and my future on the altar of his entitlement. I built something for myself. And if he benefits from it someday, it'll be because he earned it, not because I was too afraid to say no. Sometimes, when I lock up the shop at night, I stand on the sidewalk and look at the sign. Copper Cactus Tattoo. On the window, in smaller letters, owner, Susan Martin. I still have heart flutters now and then. I still take my meds. I still go to the cardiologist. But when I lie in bed at night, staring at the ceiling, I don't hear Ethan's voice yelling about what I owe him. I hear my own voice saying, no, enough. I choose me this time. Revenge accomplished.
My grandmother told me this story. Thanks for watching this video. Bye bye!